Stephanie and I just got back from a trip to the Ukraine. And, you might be curious as, well, how does a couple 70-year-old, seniors end up in Ukraine? Well, it all actually goes back 40 years, where a couple that Stephanie and I met in our church, Scott and Beth Cunningham. Scott and Beth, after we met them, became missionaries in Nigeria for 25 years. We were supporting them at that time, so that's why our relationship kept going. And when they left the field, Scott became involved internationally, working with new churches. No, I'm sorry, thank you. New seminaries. Yes, this is our thing here. I speak, she corrects. She adds some missing pieces, and between the two of us, we're a complete thing, right? Anyway, Scott got involved with seminaries, helping them with the accreditation and so forth, and especially in a place like Ukraine. I mean, when Russia fell, the Ukrainian evangelicals began their first seminaries. I mean, think about that. So Scott was involved in Ukraine as well as other places, working with these seminaries. He was working with about 11 or 12 of them. In Ukraine, yeah, and then lots elsewhere. So when the war started, these seminaries there repurposed themselves almost overnight. It was the most incredible thing. And Scott, within the first several weeks of the war, went over there and took a tour of the seminaries there. We got involved, because of the war and so forth. Stephanie especially became involved with a WhatsApp group called We Are Ukraine. And we started to get to know the people personally. We got to know their stories. We got to know about a man named Taras and Valeri and others, and we, in a sense, became friends with them, even though we had not met. So this year is Stephanie's and my 50th wedding anniversary, right? And to celebrate, we took a Viking River tour and ended up in Prague. And, as we're planning this, suddenly we think, wait a second. How close is Prague to Ukraine? And we look, it says, short plane ride to Warsaw. So, well, maybe we could go see our friends. So thing is like a couple people like Stephanie and I, it would be so easy to go over there and be a burden. So we said, well, we got to somehow contact them. And we said, well, let's go with Scott, right? Well, Scott, right then, was in the Ukraine. So when we contacted him, he could say, well, I'll go talk to them. And Scott said they'd be thrilled. And not only that, Beth and I will go with you. Okay, now, when you think in terms of a foreign country, a new experience and so forth, that kind of logistic meant the world. So Stephanie and I are thinking, well, maybe we should go to the Ukraine. Within a week, everything was settled. And then the rest was just working out other logistics like plane travels and those kinds of things. Clicker is not working. Okay. All right, so here's the Ukraine. Okay. You can say that in the microphone. Okay. I'm prone to say the Ukraine, but it's Ukraine. Okay. Okay. This is a map of Ukraine. And you can see down in the lower corner where Ukraine is in terms of Europe. It's actually quite a large country. It is like the breadbasket of Europe and possibly in the world. The agriculture that is there is just phenomenal. I've highlighted the 3 places where we went. They're all in the west. You need to understand that the fighting is all in the east. So we were never actually near the front line. So we began all the way in the west in the little thing, I think there's a pointer here. No, oh, okay. In Lviv, we came from Warsaw, we drove into Lviv, traveled to Rivne, which is where our host lives, and from there we went to Kyiv.
So we are at the border of Poland and Ukraine right now. And this is what a border looks like. I don't know if you can see off in the distance, kind of behind those buses, the lanes. And we are waiting in a line of cars. And as you can see, maybe you can see, people just have their cars turned off and they're just standing outside of them. And then, you know, every now and then, everything will move forward and people will jump in the cars and move them. So it's an interesting experience, having never crossed the border like this before. Had a funny experience. Don and I were walking to stretch a little bit, and we saw a sign for a water closet, which of course you know means bathroom. And I was desperate, so I tried to get into it, but you had to pay money, which happens a lot here in Europe when it comes to public.
There we go.
We didn't want to bore you with all that.
We were lucky with our border crossings. We were lucky each time. This particular one only took us about 2 hours to get through. Our driver on the way up to pick us up in Warsaw took him 5 hours to get through. When we came back from Ukraine back to Warsaw, we got through in like an hour and a half, which is just unheard of. But our friends Scott and Beth, who came back through about a week later, took them 7.5 hours. So this can be a rather grueling thing. This is a picture of a sunflower field. Like I said, Ukraine is is a huge agricultural center. The actual flag of Ukraine, which is yellow on the bottom, blue on the top, is supposed to represent wheat fields, because Ukraine is like the breadbasket. And the reason that this is important is that if Russia manages to take Ukraine, they will control that. And that's just something that is worth remembering. But I like this picture because it kind of looks like the Ukraine flag a little bit with the sunflowers. There were hundreds of acres of sunflowers. I mean, it just treated us the entire time we were there.
It's sort of the unofficial flower of the country. And considering the sunflower looks to the light and it stands tall and strong, and when you think about the difficult history that Ukraine has had, which we will not take you through, but it's been a hard history, and I think the sunflower is the appropriate flower for them.
Okay. So, cast of characters. Going around the circle, beginning with the young man in the blue shirt, that is Scott Cunningham. Next to him is his wife, Beth. They're the ones that we have known for 40 years, and they're the ones who, in a sense, were responsible for the contacts we've made while we were in Ukraine. At the end of the table is Taras Dyatlik. He was our host during this time. And part of the story of our trip here is about a week before we entered Ukraine, Taras's brother, his 33-year-old brother, was a medic on the front line, and a drone hit his vehicle, even though it was clearly marked. And his brother was very, very in a desperate situation. Even while this picture was taken, he was in a coma. And quite frankly, the day that we left, his brother died. So as we go through all these pictures and you see Taras and his family and so forth, you need to understand that the war was actually very close to him. He was exhibiting what we saw among the Christians in Ukraine, which is this ability to come out of themselves, set aside their own needs and so forth to minister to the needs of others. One of the first things that was out of Taras's mouth way back when we first got to know him is the mission doesn't change. Okay?
It was really hard, and sometimes during the week, just your heart just went out to Taras. And his brother is probably about 18 years younger than him. So I think there was more, even besides brother relationship, maybe a little bit of, maybe help raise him, because his brother was about the same age as his son. So it was just hard to watch him a lot of times. He was such a good sport, like Don was saying, but then there were times, especially as the week went on and the news got bleaker and bleaker. But our heart just went out to him. And the thing is, and he will tell you the same thing, that his story is the story of tens of thousands of people. Tens of thousands of people there have lost loved ones. And as my heart was breaking for him, that it doesn't make it easier for any one family that there are a lot of them. But the thing is that there are so many people suffering like that.
It actually gets along to why it is that we were a ministry over there. I mean, all we did is we sat down with them, we ate with them, and we talked to them, and we met with them, and so forth. But when you are in a country where everybody is grieving, where everybody has a story, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the neighbor and says, I lost my brother today. And the neighbor says, well, I lost my sister, right? But we come along, and they can tell us their stories. And one of my friends said, that's the ministry of presence. It's kind of related to visiting prisoners in a prison. So, we that's what we provided them is a ear that was able to listen to their stories and bring them back and relate them to you.
And please note, this was a very special meal. It had taken a long time to get from Warsaw all the way to here. That included that border crossing and everything. And we had gotten a late start while we were driving, and the driving was quite different than the way we drive here. It was shoop, 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 it was really different. If you've ever been to Europe, you know the way they drive there. Anyway, it was crazy driving. It was raining. It was hailing. And then as we got to the hotel, it all cleared up, and Taras was waiting for us and had been waiting all day for us, which was heartwarming in itself. But we just sat there. The weather had just gotten very balmy, and there we were among these people who we just had a heart connection with, and we were eating borscht. And it was just a moment. You know how you have those moments in life? You'll never forget how you felt that moment. And that was one of those times.
Signs of war. Like I said, we were in the West. We were nowhere close to the front lines. And Livni, I mean, there may be some towns further west than Livni, but when we were in Livni, Lviv, sorry. Yeah, while we were in Lviv, you'd say, well, war? Well, this is a church in Lviv. We were walking outside, and outside this church, when we were walking by, there was a baby dedication. There was a family. They were all dressed to the nines, and it was just like this normal-looking event, this family event, and so forth. And then when we broke up, when they broke up, we went inside this church, and we see this little thing where these are the missiles that have fallen on Lviv. And not only that, but if you were to turn from here, if you were to turn to the right, there was this wall of photographs. And the photographs were all the soldiers that this church had given a service for, fallen soldiers. So, and the reason that this is important is I'm on X all the time, and there's some anti-Ukraine videos, and they all show something like, look, I mean, here's a concert going on in Kyiv. Everything's normal. Where's the war? Well, we had just seen a baby dedication. It looked normal. I could have taken a picture of it. And then you go in, or you go down the street, and you see the signs of war. When we went to Kyiv, our friend Taras was able to talk to some guards and get us into the area where the Russians had bombed a children's hospital about the week before we got there. This is at the gate. You can see some stuffed animals and so forth, but when you go in, this is not where it was bombed. But the thing is, when a missile goes off, there is a shock wave. So if you look at this picture carefully, all the tan windows and so forth, that's because there's wood there, because the blast wave just broke all the windows. You can see where the shock wave busted out parts of the side of the, some of the siding and so forth. So, I mean, it was very significant. Here you can see more of that. This is part of where the blast actually occurred, and I did take, I don't have all the pictures, but I did take pictures through the windows here, and there were these little color, children's kind of drawings and so forth on the inside. This is where the bomb really hit. Now, the thing is, there's more, it looks like more damage here because they're demolishing it. But, Russian, this was a cruise missile. They were guided, and you need to understand that this attack on this hospital was deliberate, and it was very, very scary and so forth.
The one photo of Rivne with all the different pictures.
That's coming.
Okay.
So in Kyiv, you may remember at the beginning of the war that the Russian tanks were on highways, charging into Kyiv. Putin thought that this was going to be an easy victory, and I mean they came very close. So there's a couple towns. One of them is Borodyanka, the other was Bucha, and another was Irpin. Okay. That the Russians actually conquered before they were pushed back and the thing was liberated. In Borodyanka, they decided to leave some of the damaged buildings up rather than fix them. So,
this is a reminder for everybody to remember what happened there.
So this is what it looks like when the Russians come in and they begin to destroy a city. You can see signs of fire there and so forth going on. And then in Bucha, Bucha was, when they reclaimed Bucha, and I guess I'll just go here, they found dozens of shallow graves, where the Russians had come into the city and they'd executed people, tortured and executed people. This is a memorial over one of the mass graves. And what you see on here are all the names of the people that they had found in this grave.
It was apparently just disgusting what they found when they took the bodies out of these graves so that they could have so their families could come and get them, they could have a proper funeral and all that. And the signs of torture that they saw and everything was just unspeakable.
So, and the thing is, like, let's see, what names of missing persons, that they've not found these people. They're suspecting that there may be more mass graves to find, and so forth.
Either that or they were taken to Russia.
Either that or they were taken to Russia. So, and then there was the Ukraine Evangelical Theological Seminary, which was a seminary in Kyiv that was hit.
Oh,
Go ahead.
No, you
Okay.
go.
I've selected these pictures. I found this one fascinating because we were eating in that cafeteria in this seminary, and I just happened to look over, and there's this door, and this door had been pierced through with all kinds of shrapnel and so forth because they haven't repaired everything yet. What I'm saying is that there were signs of this war all the time. There was no escaping it.
Yeah, it was certainly nothing like what it would be if we were at the front lines. I mean, I can't even imagine what that's like. Whole villages are being wiped out, and it's terrible. But even where we were, everybody was affected by the war in some way.
And interestingly enough, I mean, obviously, like 2 weeks before we were there was a missile that struck the Children's Hospital in Kyiv, and we were in Kyiv. But interestingly enough, all the time we were there, we did not hear a single air raid siren, which is actually somewhat unusual. So memorials. I mentioned that one church where you went in and there was just all these photographs. There's something about the Ukrainians where they honor their war dead with photographs. I mean, they were all over the place. You can see here, I mean, as far as this picture goes, is a wall of picture after picture after picture. Now here, it begins with 2014 when Russia had invaded Ukraine at that time, but going towards the very end, we then got into the war. But they remember, there's something about, a name is not good enough. There has to be the photograph, which, this is in Rivne. And there's a square, you can see that each one of these pillars has 3 sides, so there's 3 photographs here, very large. Taras's brother, who has died, I suspect that his picture will be added because he was from Rivne. But again, just this memory. And now the Christian response. And starting with Lviv, we met the president of the Lviv Theological Seminary, Volodymyr Solodyak. This is a picture of the seminary. Here's our friend Taras there. But again, this seminary, when the Russians held Ukraine, this seminary did not exist. Evangelical Christians were a cult. And in the 30 or so years since the fall of the Soviet Union, the evangelical church has emerged as a strength in Ukraine. What's that?
Praise God.
Praise God, yeah, exactly. But guess what? If Russia takes over, this is all gone. This is all gone. So, and I mentioned that the seminaries repurposed themselves immediately after the war, when the war started. They became hubs for the internally displaced people in Ukraine. Russia comes, as Russia even now is invading the West and they are taking over cities, the people leave. Well, where do they go? They went to the seminaries because the seminaries opened their doors and the seminaries provided shelter, they provided food, they provided help for the next destination. Taras very early on was describing how he worked with this one person to get her from the east of Ukraine to the west of Ukraine. And how that actually had a little excursion into Russia and then up into Belarus and then down in Ukraine, step by step by step. But the seminaries all repurposed themselves to that. This particular seminary, this, by the way, over on the right is our Vladimir. Next to him in the blue is Roman, who's a theologian there. And this immediately surprised Stephanie and I. I mean, we were there, and suddenly we're meeting presidents of seminaries. I mean, who are we to meet a president of a seminary?
We're like, I think you're the wrong people. These little people
Right.
from Kennesaw,
And why, but they were all glad, again, just to tell us what they were doing and so forth. This particular seminary built modular units to help with the internally displaced people so that they are able to have a ready home. They're providing a food pantry. They're working with orphanages and so forth. And the other thing that they're working with is power, right? Russia has destroyed power stations. I mean, there was not a single restaurant, hotel, meeting place, even here while we were meeting with, in this section where the lights just don't suddenly just go out. And, it's fine when it's in the summer, so the air conditioning is working for a while. But winter is coming. And winter is deadly without power. So one of the things that this particular seminary is doing is they are getting the generators like this one here, just to provide power that is needed when it is absolutely needed. Okay, I'm going to let you talk on this one.
So, as Don mentioned earlier, I became friends there was this WhatsApp group that our friend Taras sort of heads up, and there were a lot of people that write in that group. And then I got to know some of these people on Facebook and such. So I've been just fascinated by the things that they've been doing. Also, in their writings, sometimes on Facebook or on this WhatsApp group, they share their hearts. And it's sometimes like reading one of the prophets, like in Jeremiah, and he's just saying, Lord, what are you doing? You forgotten all about me? Or, you said it was hard. You didn't say it was going to be this hard. I mean, you know how the prophets so often cried out to God, and they asked what I call the hard questions. Same with the Psalms. Psalm 13. My mind just went blank. Where are you, O Lord? How long, O Lord? That's what I'm waiting for. Yeah, how long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? And these people ask these questions. So we're telling you the one part of the story when we're talking about all the things that they've done, but to read the agony that they go through, and to me, I see them almost like digging for gems or something, and then they come up with, where they're still holding on to God. And after all their questioning and everything, they're still there with God. And it just has blown me away, partly a little bit because it's some things that James often says, we don't know what's going to happen in this country. And I almost feel like I wish I could soak up, their courage and their faith and how they hang on to the Lord through all of this stuff that's so difficult. Anyway, so all that to say, one of the guys that I really wanted to meet was this Valeri. I can't even begin to say his last name. And I was told you probably can't meet him because he really lives pretty far away from where we'll be. And I said, oh, okay. And the reason I was anxious to meet him is because I'd noticed that he and his wife do a lot of delivering aid to some of the places that really need it. Like if you remember a while back in Kherson, there was a dam that was breached, so there was a lot of flooding. So they've taken supplies into there or organized other people to do that as well. He's also the head of a seminary, and he's also the pastor of a church. And like I said, he and his wife do a lot of this humanitarian work, and it just really stirred me to read all that he did. One of the things I think is so cool is that he did a camp for soldiers who have lost limbs and have prostheses. And sometimes he'll just take some of them out for a day trip fishing. And I just think, wow, that's amazing. And what sensitivity, too. So anyway, I thought, and I was told I probably wouldn't meet him. And I said, well, that's okay. If somebody from Ukraine came over here and wanted to meet, some pastor in California, I'd have to say, oh, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. So I thought, okay, that's fine. Well, as God would have things, it turned out that he had a meeting in the city that we were at one morning, and we got to have breakfast with him. So that's him, Valeri. And we would probably say Valerie, but it's Valeri.
When we were having breakfast, when we were having breakfast with him, because Stephanie's friends with him on Facebook and also friends with his wife, and they'd have their friends looking over their Facebook page, and they would say, "Who's Stephanie?"
Yeah, in the comments.
Right, and Valeri says, "Well, Stephanie is the friend I haven't met yet." And then we met him, but again, I mean, you look at him, he's kind of this normal-looking guy, but he, like everyone else, has had his losses, but he is coming. He's lifting himself out of his losses and ministering to the country. Which again, is because of this that I came back from Ukraine richer. Because you begin to see what is actually possible. Tetiana. This is Tetiana. She was our guide through Volodyanka and Bucha and Irpin. She lived in Bucha when the Russians attacked, and she and her family were saying, "Well, we got to get out of here." but there's all this shelling going on and so forth. And they said, well, when do we leave? And, Tatiana says, well, as soon as it's quiet for a minute, we're out of here.
It's like that was a sign.
That was the
Yeah.
sign. When it was quiet for 1 minute, it got quiet for a minute, and they left, took the back roads, and were able to escape. She also has several ministries going on within the Ukraine. One of them happens to be a coffee shop. Now, me and coffee, to meet someone who has a coffee shop, gets her coffee from local roasters and so forth, what could be better than that? But this is the inside of her coffee shop. She turned out to be incredibly generous. All of our drinks were free, and then she gave us a couple little gifts and so forth. So she was very, very generous.
Do you have go ahead. Oh, he doesn't have the picture. We have a picture of the canopy over the entry of her place. If you look up, it's full of holes from bullets and
Right.
shrapnel.
I didn't want, if I had taken every picture we had of bullets, holes, shrapnel, and things like that, this thing would have gone so long. Because even down the street from this coffee shop, there's still buildings that have the bullet holes, the shrapnel, the damage, and so forth. The Ukraine Evangelical Theological Seminary, Ivan Rusin, this was a seminary that was hit when Russia, because it's close to,
What's in Kiev?
yeah, it's in Kyiv, and it was hit. On the right here is Ivan. And to the right of him is a display of all the missile parts that they collected that had come down on this seminary. But this is part of how this seminary repurposed itself. You notice here new programs, 20 over on the left, new programs of 2022, 2024, the dates of the war, helping churches to adapt to ministry at wartime. Right? The seminary is still doing theological education, but they're all saying, well, how do we prepare the churches to minister to the people? And this is one page of all the ministries that they've put in place. But the thing is like, this place does anything that's needed. One of the pictures he showed us, they have this van, and it was a picture of 2 body bags in the van because somebody needed some dead picked up and taken to relatives. And they said, okay, you need it done, we'll do it.
And all the seminaries are rethinking their curriculums to adapt it to their wartime situation.
I like theology and practice of the table. How to just have fellowship over a meal and so forth. And then the human spirit. Now here I'm moving beyond the Christians in Ukraine and just going to Ukraine itself, what I notice in Ukraine, and children and families. So here's Taras and a 10-day-old baby. This is his nephew. His niece, sorry. His niece. His sister had given birth, 10 days before. As we were going around city after city and so forth, I noticed all the women with strollers. They were all over the place. And someone with a stroller, how old is the baby in the stroller? 3? That's stretching it. Probably 2 or under. Well, the war started in 2022. That means that all of these strollers are young children that have been born since the start of the war. Now, I don't know about you, but around here I hear statements like, I'm not going to bring a child into this world, right? Well, how about if you're in a country and suddenly you see, no, having a child is the future, right? There's something about what I saw there that says, these people have a hope, and they're exhibiting the hope by having children. And here is Taras's sister and a new niece that has been born.
Also, the thing I always remind on, is that because we would pass children playing in playgrounds and there, I don't know if you have a picture of
I-
the mall.
well,
Okay,
I
there's
do.
this mall with all this play area in the top. But the sad thing is probably most of those kids don't have dads at home. Either they've lost them in the war or they're fighting.
And again, the spirit, this is to Ross and his family. I mean, we have his brothers, we have his sisters-in-laws and, fiancés and so forth. But again, like all the brothers, all the sisters-in-law, their brother, Andre, is in a coma and is going to die within a couple of days. But you look at this and how normal this is. One of the ways that they are coping with the war is we are going to live as normally as we can. And when you think about that's the spirit of victory. Because if you are playing the victim, like, oh, poor me, the Russians are, and so forth, and you're not having babies and you're not, getting together and you're not trying to live your life as best you can, you already set yourself up for defeat. They've set themselves up for victory. This is in a mall. And like I said, I could have gone around, taken a picture of the mall, posted on Facebook, says, where's the war? The thing is, like, this was a cool little thing. And the young boys there, they were running back and forth. They were giggling. There's almost like they were not aware that their country was at war. Here, they could sit down and the lady would bring them over a Laker kit and pour out the parts for them, and they just go through and build it all. But this was just one part of an entire thing for children at this mall. And then hope expressed by graffiti. How about this? Graffiti on a wall in Borodianka.
This is an original Banksy, if anybody follows him.
But, I mean, you can see the message here. We, the Ukrainians, are doing the judo flip of Russia. This one for me is precious. This was, and there again, you see the humanity here, of an older man and his wife. I presume it's his wife. I look at this, I see Stephanie and me, right? We look better, but
That's about right.
But the thing is, like, there's a hope here. There's an optimism here. And then this one is my favorite. This was, I took this picture in Borodianka, and it is a young girl playing the violin with yellow and blue notes going up. And again, do you see the optimism that's being expressed here? These are not a people who, they take the war serious. The war is a war of attrition. And quite frankly, Russia has more soldiers than Ukraine has. But I will tell you, the need for Ukraine to be victorious is paramount.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is another, this is, we did not take this video. This is a video from, I believe, Odessa, after the Russians had bombed, and just, again, to show the community spirit that's going on here.
This really touched my heart. It was probably a year or so ago, but Odessa gets bombed quite a bit, and there is a seminary there, and I just love some of the things that come out of that seminary and the leader. He is so dedicated to helping people and also to educate seminarians.
Okay, so whatever we have to do to get this video going.
There we go.
І ще засіяє захід, схід, північ і південь. Ми голос вулиць, ми голос народу. Вони можуть забрати життя у нас, але на свободу. Це наша земля, і ми звідси не підемо. І ще засіяє захід, схід, північ і південь.
I have no idea what they're saying, but it sounds like they're not going to get us, right?
Oh, sorry.
Probably a couple things that
Yeah.
we kind of missed.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
These
please.
are not going to sound very in order, but just looking at our little notes here. One is he was telling the story of Tetiana in Bucha when the Russians were trying to take Kyiv, and along the way, they did get these 3 cities. There was another story that Ivan, the president of that seminary, I think he was at the seminary. His wife was home, and he was wishing his wife would evacuate, but she just didn't want to. And then suddenly she felt like the Lord told her, you have 45 minutes to get out of here. So she gathered some, I think some other neighbors or something. They piled in a car, and they took back roads and everything and managed to escape. So, and then, of course, later on, because the Russians Russians did not take Kyiv, but they did take those 3 cities. But later on, those 3 smaller cities were liberated. So she was able to come back after they were liberated. Another story is there was a picture of the seminary head, the president of the seminary in Kyiv, and there was a guy next to him. And I recorded a little interview with him. And he was telling the story about how he had just gotten gas the day before the Russians came. And he was so thankful because people were lined up for miles at gas stations to get gas. So anyway, that was cool. Another thing, and we've talked about the border crossings and such, and we talked about signs of war, and we forgot to mention this, but one of the things that there's so many people that are having to leave the more hard-hit areas, and they might find other places in Ukraine to live or other places in the world to live. And, it's really sad that they just have to uproot themselves. And we were actually personally part of seeing this happen when our driver was driving us home, driving us back to Warsaw. They said, I hope you don't mind, there's going to be a couple other people in the van. And it was this little family, and they were having to leave one of the harder hit areas. And they were eventually going to be going to New Jersey. And, in fact, I got my borscht recipe from this woman. We used Google Translate. She had her phone on Google Translate, and I had mine. And I was writing down the ingredients, and it was a lot of fun. But bless her heart, she didn't know English real well. And, just thinking, what a hard road ahead that this little family has, And I said, so are you leaving parents? And yeah, she was leaving everything. And I think they had an 11-month-old baby, and I think they felt like they needed to go for the baby's sake. So that was sad. Then our friends Scott and Beth, they left a week after us. And when they left, they had a little family also, as a mom and dad and 2 little kids. And if you can believe they're the ones that had that 7-hour border crossing. Can you imagine with 2 tiny little kids? But anyway, so this is a reality that we actually saw, is all this displacement of people. And the statistics are crazy. There's so many people. All right, I think that was all I wanted to cover.
This is just a picture that was taken. You can see the signs of the bombing and so forth, but flowers pushing up through. There are at least 3 reasons why we need to support Ukraine and a victory. One of them, quite frankly, is that in the 1990s, Ukraine had the 2nd largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world. And we, the United States, asked them to disarm themselves, which they did. But in the asking, we said, we will have your back if Russia invades. So it is a matter of, we made a promise that we should keep. The other is that there is a philosophy driving this war. It's called Russian world. And it just basically says that Russia has this idea that Ukraine belongs to them, as well as Belarus, as well as several other countries. And Russia is not, if they conquer Ukraine, they're not going to stop there. They will continue on. And then the third, quite frankly, is the people. I mean, the people I talked to, the people I met, they love freedom. They're free. 30 years ago, they were not free. They are now. And there's a sense where those of us who enjoy the freedoms in this country should be around to support anyone who equally desires to be free, especially with the spirit and the fact that they are, they are willing to do their part. So what can you do? All right. There is an organization. It's called Mesa Global. Scott Cunningham actually works with them. And they have a area called Ukraine Refugees Assistance. Now, it says Ukraine Refugees Assistance, but if you go there, this is the group that is supporting the seminaries that are the hubs. They are supporting the people that we met. They're supporting the Lviv Seminary. They're supporting the Ukraine Seminary. They're supporting Valeria. They're supporting Tatiana. And therefore, if you are of a mind to give, I have little cards back there on the table that have all this information on, the QR code and so forth. So if you are of a mind to give a little bit, especially maybe for some generators, for this winter, it would be much appreciated. I have been assured, because like I said, I'm talking to these people, all the money that goes into this fund goes to them. So this is a good organization. Okay. Any questions?
I didn't see any civilians walking around with weapons. Now, I didn't see any civilians in these pictures walking around with weapons, and they got a war going on right next door. In this country, if we had Russians invading Alabama, everybody in my neighborhood would be walking around with armed. Are they not allowed to do that? Are the ones closer to the war actually arm themselves, or what? Do you know?
Number one, I don't know, but number two, the war is being fought not, on the streets where we were. The war is being fought on the front, and it is desperate there. There are, there are young men, like I said, Taraz's brother was hit by a drone. I mean, there are young men that are dying there, and that's where the war is being fought. As far as I know, there's no Russian infiltration, up where we were.
If there are gun laws there.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I don't know. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your kind attention. And Stephanie and I are here if you have other questions or you want some more details about what we saw and so forth. We'd be glad to share. So thank you so much.
Amen.